We've all heard about fighters who have lost the edge, but what does this specifically mean? It means, if you visualize once again this vortex, the edge is the ability to remain in the safe, controllable center while imposing the storm on an opponent. That's the edge of the storm. You push that onto an opponent. Losing the edge is something very specific. Remember, we spoke about somatosensory stimulation. A somatosensory signature. Let's think of this as a pattern that we don't recognize as familiar. Somebody clobbers us and knocks us off balance. That signature registers with our body. It registers with our experience. Now, if we introduce something that is new, something unexpected, a mistake or poor performance, then that signature will start a somatic profile registering. What was our somatic profile? Concentric, isometric, or eccentric? Remember? The muscles tighten. We're either going to flinch, we're going to brace, or we're going to resist. Well, we can focus that on an opponent. As soon as we introduce something to him, a signature, we either disrupt his balance through mechanoreception, proprioception, we change the architecture of his limbs, or through nociception, we administer trauma and pain to his body. That registers, and he produces a flinch, a brace, or resistance. If he does that, he's becoming dense. Pun intended. Visceral profile starts to occur. His heart rate starts to elevate. His breathing starts to gas. He starts to hyperventilate. He becomes angered. That elicits the density that we're talking about. We can focus this on him. And we should, when we see that in somebody, we should recognize that, that's the opportunity. That's when we should start turning on the steam. Because as soon as they start becoming resistant, bracing or flinching, as soon as their breathing starts to elevate, if they get pissed off, angered, or frustrated, that's when you start taking it to him. Because that's when he has internal distractions, the density. His recovery process is what determines whether he's losing the edge or gaining the edge in his mind. We want him losing the edge. So we want to inhibit his recovery process. The recovery process is his ability to let go of distractions and for him to become indistractable. So we can inhibit that recovery process by adding more distractions. See this? That's why you have to take it to him. You don't spar with him. You don't jump in, offense, defense. This isn't a game. This isn't he does his move, you do your move. Go beyond that. You wash over top of him. It's a tide. You turn it, and it just flows right over him, and he starts being swallowed up by it because you inhibit his recovery process. Remember how we said great athletes aren't the ones with perfect precision. They're the ones that can most quickly recover from mistakes and the unexpected when they happen. When they happen. We want him to be overconfident. When he's overconfident, what happens? He is not expecting the unexpected. He is not prepared for mistakes when they happen. He's not prepared for poor performance. We inhibit his recovery process. We can do this proactively. We know what we need to do. We have the exercises. We have the technology. We can do this. We also need to know how to gain the edge, how to keep the edge. This is what we'll move on to. In an ideal world, we would arrive at the fight. We would be psychologically and physically prepared. We would not make any mistakes. We would have incredible performance, and nothing unexpected would happen. And our expectations would exceed, our performance would exceed our expectations. Okay, now to the real world. You aren't prepared physically or psychologically when it hits, meaning that your worst performance in your training is the best you can hope for in reality. I'm not saying that you're totally unprepared. I'm saying look at this from a realistic point of view. You are not going to arrive and be sitting on your throne. Each time that you arrive at a situation, it's going to be difficult. It's going to be difficult because of the initial loss of the edge. You feel like, it starts to go. It starts to go. So everything is based upon your recovery process. Regaining and keeping the edge is based upon your recovery process. Once the mistake or the unexpected event happens, then you need to have a crisis intervention. Crisis intervention, you need to intervene on that distraction. Once the distraction happens, what happens? Your attention starts to narrow and you become in tension. Once that happens, your muscles start to tighten, your breathing and heart rate start to increase. So what do you do there? Well, the crisis intervention should be twofold. You should have a psychological focus on process over product, on procedural tasks, task-oriented cues versus outcomes. What does that mean? Well, if you have to accomplish something, you need to immediately focus on what needs to happen next. If that means broadening and externalizing so you can accomplish all of the variables that are happening, address all of the variables in your environment, then that's what your task is. Task-oriented cue. A product or an outcome-oriented cue is, I need to survive. I need to win. What am I going to do? Already, that self-dialogue, that internal negative feedback is going to start impacting your recovery process. So you need to think immediately. I'm okay. I'm headed in the recovery process. I will regain control. Every seasoned fighter gets the butterflies in an event. Every person, no matter what their combative experience has been, gets the butterflies. They get anxiety. But the difference is that people who have had this experience know the difference between recovering immediately when the butterflies do occur. The butterflies should be a trigger for you to proactively start your somatic and visceral engineering. The somatic engineering is reintegrating our movement and our alignment and our breathing. The visceral engineering is talking about lowering our heart rate, controlling our blood flow, being able to decrease and appropriate our respiratory function. You can do this. We have the strategies for it. We've been working on it. This reintegration strategy is going to be paramount for your ability to hit the recovery process and regain the edge and keep it. Think about it this way. When you need that intervention, if you need to move forward and you're not focusing on process, you're focusing on product, it could be right in front of you. It's like you're in a hurry to get to an appointment and your glasses may be on your head and your keys may be in your hand, but you can't find them anywhere because you're not focusing on the process. You're not focusing on what you have to do. That intervention has to happen. If you're clawing up and you're covering up because it's raining down on you, what's going to happen? Advantage goes to the offense. As he's pummeling on top of you, you need to realize, this information is the precipitation for me to counter assault. When I start feeling this, that's my key. That's my opportunity to explode. That's your ability. That's your information. It's to your advantage. Feeling anxiety will not affect your performance. It's the negative perception of performance that affects performance. Anxiety works to your advantage. As soon as you start to feel that visceral alteration, your muscles start to tense, your breathing starts to increase, your heart rate starts to pound, that's your trigger. It's a signpost for you. That's when you turn into the reintegration strategy, which we'll introduce next. So, our reintegration strategy. What is this specifically? Well, if our reintegration has been breathing, movement, and alignment, how does this apply specifically to the venue of hand-to-hand fighting and hand-to-hand combat? Depolarize, equalize, mobilize. It should be that cognitive imperative that's in your head. That's what you train. That's what you have as a trigger in your head. As soon as you feel the storm raining down, depolarize, equalize, mobilize. It should be a key in your head, a trigger for you. Every time that you feel that somatosensory signature that something's not right, immediately, proactively, that's what you start to begin. Depolarize your structure. When it starts to rain down, what happens? Well, we go into that somatic profile of either concentrically flinching, isometrically bracing, or eccentrically resisting. As soon as we feel it, we need to depolarize our structure, because what happens? We cover up, right? We cover up, and our solar and lunar plexus start to be fixed in space. They start to stand there, and we try and brace against it. We can't do that. In order for the rest of your body to begin operating, you have to free the structure. It has to be depolarized. So you start to swing. Your body starts to move. As soon as your structure is free, then your breathing and your movement can be free. But not until then. You need to depolarize your solar and lunar plexi. Equalize the pressure. The air in your body and the air outside of your body is pressure. You can think of pressure in the vortex. Pressure could be wind shear, pressure could be current, pressure could be air pressure. The pressure is what you feel. And remember, we said pressure overrides precision. Pressure overrides precision. You need to equalize the pressure that you're experiencing. So what happens? Exhale. If you start to feel those visceral functions start to alter, and your breathing starts to hyperventilate, you start to become tense, you start to huff and puff because you're pissed off, you're angry, and you're frustrated, well, you're headed down the drain. Your performance goes down the vortex. Equalize the pressure. Exhale. It could be simple as yelling. But you need to train those exercises, and there are exercises akimbo all throughout of our resources. Just look for them. This is a comprehensive system. Mobilize. Mobilize your architecture. If you've depolarized your structure and equalized pressure, now you can move. Your limbs can start to operate. You need them moving, because as long as they're tense, they're not going to move. As long as you have tension in your muscles, your contractibility prevents your ability to operate. So they need to move. Once you've mobilized, now the freedom in your muscles, that relaxation creates the recovery process. The exhalation creates the recovery process. The depolarizing the solar and lunar plexi creates the recovery process. You don't have to think your way through it. All you need is that one cognitive imperative. Remember how we said that you can't think your way through not thinking. If you get to this and you need the crisis intervention, you don't think, this sucks. What am I going to do? Well, I've got to recover. You can't think about it. You should have one cognitive imperative in mind. You can't be mired in that Buddhist quicksand of thinking about not thinking. You have to be able to act, and it has to be physical. You have to depolarize your structure, equalize the pressure, and mobilize your architecture. That's your somatic strategy. That's your proactive reintegration. Anytime that you feel that trigger, anytime the anxiety starts to happen, start to move. Start to exhale. Don't stand there. Don't start to brace. You can manipulate your own somatic and visceral function. You can control it. You need to do it proactively, and as soon as you have the trigger, it acts to your advantage. That's regaining and keeping the edge.